Welcome to the High Point Land Series. I'm here with Nick Hopp today. He's one of the agents with High Point, and I know we're going to hit a few subjects, but let's start out with talking about the 1031 exchange.
Okay.
And I know that you've done some, and I've done a few of those, and that's a pretty good tool, for the land investor, because it allows you to keep moving bigger if you're so inclined. It's a financial tool that has to do with the taxation. So go ahead and give me your experiences with that, and then I can jump into.
Yeah, you bet. I would say the easiest way to explain the 1031 exchange is it's an opportunity to be able to snowball your properties if you're looking to, transition from one piece to the next piece and be able to, as a tax benefit, avoid the taxes on those gains, and roll that right into the next piece.
So what you're getting past or getting away from are the capital gains taxes.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. And that's the biggest thing that we're utilizing the exchange for, is just to avoid that capital gains tax.
Right. And depends on the state. I'm not sure what it is in Iowa. I'm thinking it was like pushing 10%, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the federal is like 20 some or something, somewhere around there?
Correct. There's going to be a break for a couple different ways, and we won't get into the exact details of it, but high level, there's going to be a period of time where you need to own the property to be able to do this. And then also And that's interesting, because I think we should talk about that. Okay.
Because that comes up quite a bit. But anyway, to finish my thought, so what you're trying to do is save about 30% of your gain.
Correct.
So let's say you bought a piece of property for $500,000 and you sold it for $1 million. You've got a $500,000 gain.
Correct.
That normally you would pay to the IRS, roughly 25 to 30% of that, depending on the state, back as a capital gain tax. Well, by doing the 1031, you can offset that to the next property. So, as far as like understanding the structure of the 1031, that's all you're doing, is you're not avoiding ever paying it, you're just delaying when you pay it. So you move it from this property to the next one.
Correct.
And then if you sell that one and you cash out, well, you're going to pay it all the way back to this number, right? So it's not like you're getting away from paying capital gains taxes, you're just moving it out.
Correct. You're just I'm drawing a blank on the word, but you are just extending that to the next sale or to when that eventual cash out is.
Yeah.
And what's unique when we talk about buying land, and we say it all the time in our auctions and in different sales, we're buying land for a lifetime. Mm-hmm. So the thought process is even though we've got some extreme appreciation at different times, we're not always trying to capture that appreciation and move it to a different investment,
right.
But we're trying to capture that appreciation to like-kind exchange into the next property.
That's right.
And that's where the snowball comes into effect, and where we've talked about, and different people have been able to start with a 40-acre piece and roll that all the way into 1,000 acres or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so going back to the structure of that, how you do a 1031 exchange, it's really simple. You've got your basis established by your purchase price when you buy the land.
Of your first property.
Correct. Or the property that you're going to exchange from. It might be your 10th property. But you've got your purchase price. So let's stick with that $500,000 number. So you've bought your farm for $500,000. You've sold it for $1 million. So you've got a $500,000 gain. And now you're looking for the next piece. There's a few hoops you got to jump through before you buy that next piece, in terms of identifying it, making sure that it qualifies, and then making sure you're able to close on that within the allocated timeline.
Yeah. So you've got 45 days from when you sell.
Correct.
To identify the replacement properties. You don't necessarily have to pick one. I think you get to pick. It depends on the situation, but you can pick up to 10. Depends on what you're getting into, but for typical transactions, it's 3.
Correct. Yeah.
And then you've got 180 days to close on, 1 plus of those to offset the gain. So you have a clock that's ticking. I think the most challenging one is the identifying, because everybody can close within 180 days, but can you identify something within 45? And that's the hard one. So a lot of guys, what they do, in my experience, is they'll find the replacement property first, and they'll lock that up with some kind of a option or some way to hold that until they can sell their other property to roll into the replacement.
Right, and that is very common, and I sometimes challenge that thought process because if you wait to identify a property before you sell yours, there's risk in that too, right? And so the big thing is if you know you're going to, if you've got a buyer, a willing buyer, and you're able to sell the property for the price that you want, there's things to work through to extend your closing, because we talk about that clock ticking, but that clock doesn't start until you close.
That's right.
So just because you sell your property doesn't mean you need to close that in 30 days or 60 days or whatever it is. We can write those terms in there to not only give you an extended closing. So let's say we do a 90-day closing.
Right.
So you've got 3 months there before you close to start looking for properties. And then you've got another 45 days to identify 3. And then you've got, on top of that. So really this exchange process, it's not outlandish to be able to do that in 6 to 8 months. And people often think, oh, if I sell, I've got to do my exchange in 60 days or whatever it is. And that stress doesn't need to be there necessarily.
And it's not the end of the world if you cash out either.
No.
I do like doing the 1031 because you're basically delaying paying tax. So you're getting to use that money that you would have paid to the government as equity that you can transfer to the next property. So you get a lot of benefit from holding on to that 25 to 30% of your gain and continuing to move it forward. So there's some definite, I've always used the 1031. I'm trying to think if I've ever not. I've never cashed out of a piece of property in my life. I've always had a replacement somewhere. And I've been lucky enough whenever I had properties that weren't in, say, my preferred core area, that I was able to find something in my neighborhood that I wanted to buy, and then I could sell something else and roll back into it. I've probably done 5 or 6 of them, and that means I've sold 5 or 6 times. Because I've never done one yet where I didn't do a 1031.
Roll into the next.
The biggest challenge was the most recent one that I did, where I couldn't find a replacement, and we did extend the closing. We pushed the closing like 4 or 5 months out from a typical. The guy was really good about that, and I still couldn't find replacement. And then you come into that 45-day window after that, and I went to other options. Then I started looking at commercial real estate and different things like that, because like kind, everybody thinks, well, if I'm selling hunting land, I have to buy hunting land. Well, that's not true.
The case,
No, it's real estate held for investment. So if it's an investment, and almost all real estate qualifies as an investment, and other, like commercial real estate, then also falls into that same category. So you could go back and forth between commercial real estate and hunting land.
Correct, and we've done that. I've done it personally, and I've had lots of clients do that over the years too. Whether it's what we've seen in the last couple of years is you go through 2020 and landlords, big residential units, we're talking 500 plus in bigger cities, went through the frustration of collecting rents, different things, but they were still able to sell at a premium. Because the buyers for that still exist, but they chose to cash out and look towards land, and that's where we saw a lot of that land transition come from. But that's another unique scenario where it's not land for land, but actually residential to land, but still we qualify as a like kind.
Because it's held for investment. Those are the important term. And
taking one step back here to just the whole process, just to kind of wrap up the 1031 exchange. The key steps are, first of all, document that you're going to do a 1031 exchange when you sell it, right? Have a plan for how long you believe you're going to need to find the next property. And understand that if you don't find it, be okay with that cash, cashing out. Know what both of those scenarios look like. So then third, you go to closing. Fourth, you identify your properties. And again, you have 45 days up to identify them, and you can identify up to 3 properties that we know of. Some situations are different.
Yeah, some I know you can get up to as many as 10.
Right.
But I can't remember what that situation is.
I can't off the top of my head either.
Yeah.
And you can also, not to really complicate things, but you can exchange multiple properties into one. So let's say you've got, your neighbor's farm comes up for sale and you really want to buy it. Well, you've got 2 outlying 80s that you want to sell or would be willing to sell to get this neighboring piece.
Yeah.
We can sell both of those properties and exchange those into one.
That's right.
And do the same thing.
Yeah.
So again, we identify the properties in 45 days and we close within that 180-day period. And as long as everything is documented along the way, we have successfully not avoided, but pushed off that capital gains tax, or at least pushed it down the road.
Yeah, and the qualified intermediary is the key to keeping you on that straight track.
Right.
You want to get a good qualified intermediary, and then you don't have to worry about it ever coming back and slapping you in the face later with the IRS. So that's been my experience with it. It's been pretty smooth. I've never had any real issues, and I'm sure that you probably have some experiences too that have gone well doing this. It's not something to avoid. I think it's a powerful tool. It's just that you want to make sure that you're not trying to make those judgment calls.
Right.
That you've got a professional with plenty of experience in the qualified intermediary to take you through it.
Yeah, and I can think of, me personally have done a couple of different exchanges. I've done them with partners where we owned a farm together. There's actually 3 of us, and we split ways and exchanged into separate properties on our own. It was a good, we all mutually split because we were going different directions, and we had enough gain to now go on our own.
Well, and that's a good point. I know when you buy something, you want to structure it a certain way, and you need to talk to your accountant, because if you structure it as an LLC, I don't think if you sell out of your part of the LLC, you can do a 1031. So I think you have to structure it as a partnership, because then you can sell out of your part of that partnership and do a 1031 out of that. So that's one thing to make sure that, even if you're thinking about, well, I've got these partners, how are we going to do this if we divide this up later? I would have a good accountant in that process, because you could end up having to pay capital gains just because you organize as an LLC.
Right, and that, you and Lucas had a good episode on partners and the good and the bad of that.
Yeah.
But there are some fail-safes in there that you can set up at the front end of that agreement to be able to partner up, buy a farm, sell it, and go your separate ways and still utilize this 1031 exchange.
So if you're going into a partnership, at least keep that in mind, that you structure it in a way that you can use a 1031 later. But gosh, we could go on and on, couldn't we? There's a lot of interesting stuff in this. And I guess to wrap it up, one thing I've learned is that probably in no other transactions have I ever been involved in are there so many options for achieving your goals as there is with real estate. It's sort of like, if you can dream it, you can do it. There's some way, using options, using these various tools that are out there, of getting from A to B, even if you never dreamed it was possible. And the 1031 is just one of those tools that you can work with. But well, thanks for joining us this week. We're going to keep going, Nick, you and I here today, and come up with some more stuff. So keep checking back, and we'll bring that to you.